Okay guys, so today I wanted to make a video just showing a way to do what Amanda is asking for here over at the Digital Ambition Inner Circle. And effectively what Amanda's looking for is this dot with a line and having it positionable somehow. There's two examples here. There's a dot here where it's the line goes to the left of it, and the first example where the dot goes vertically. The big question here is, what is it relative to? So when you've got a complex design like this, where you've got all sorts of alignment, it's when you're putting these decoration elements on there, it's like, well, what is that relevant to? Is it relevant to this heading? Is it sort of a quarter of a way along that heading and then, so many pixels or M's below it? Is it relative to the left of this box here and then from the top? Is it relative to this button and it's just so many pixels above the button and extending above it? There are so many possibilities for what this could be relative to, and that is the question that you really need to look at on a per design basis. And that's the thing I want to look at today, is what can we do to create this dot? How do we position that? This is just one idea. There's plenty of other ideas that you can apply to this. But here's a very simple layout where I've got a grid. I've got 3 columns here. And the first one, I've got a simple heading. And I've got a dot with a line coming out of the bottom of it. And that dot is actually positioned absolutely with respect to this container, so the box around it. I then have a second one, which is a smaller dot, but a wider line, and it's all orange. And it is actually positioned relative to this heading. So it's actually, I think it's 1M below that, so minus 1M from the bottom, positioned absolutely again. We've got the same kind of thing here, where it's basically the same sort of sizing as the orange line, except for we've rotated it around to the left and we've positioned it to be 0 from the right of this container, and I think 1.2M from the bottom. All of these use exactly the same CSS rules. All we're doing is for the colors, the sizes, the lengths, all that sort of stuff, we're just overriding some CSS variables on an ID level for each of these. And for the rotation and the positioning of it, we're using the Bricks UI to do that. So once you've defined your CSS for this, it's very simple to change its look, and it's very simple to change its position and rotation relative to your content. So with this here, if we go to the builder, for example, on this one here, if I take away that extra text there, you can see the line moves up, because it's relative to the text. So if I keep adding to it, the line is relative to the bottom of that text. Same with the let's get rid of that text there. Well, same with this one here, it's relative to the bottom. So if I put another line in there, it stays relative to the bottom of that text. So if I position this relative to the container, what would happen is if I added lines of text, that line would now be eating into that text here, because it's relative to the container around it, not to the heading itself. So to do that, we need to put these headings into containers themselves that are positioned relatively, so we can position this dot to be absolutely positioned relative to that container. All right, enough wordy stuff. So let's have a look at how this is done. So I'm going to look at my first example, example 1. Where on my, I think that's a block, it is, I've just got a padding of 15, so I've got a padding around the outside here, and I've got the position set to relative, and that's because I'm positioning this dot relative to that container in this particular case. If I look at the actual dot itself, in my layouts, I've not got that positioned at all by the look of it. This is something I keep falling over with Bricks. I'm looking for my settings here, should be on the ID level. I'm actually got the class selected, so I'm just going to deselect the class. Now I can see what I'm supposed to be seeing. So it's positioned absolute, and it's 2.5 EM from the top. So that's relative to this block because that's the first parent that has a relative position. So that's why it's like that. Because I haven't specified left or right, it will actually position it within the padding. If I specify left of 0, it's going to stick it right to the edge of that box up here. So that's just the absolute and relative positioning, just understanding a little bit about how that works. And that's pretty much that for that one there. Okay, so the CSS, all of the CSS is put on this dot decoration, and we're going to have a quick look at that. So if we look at the CSS here, I'm creating some scope variables, so color, dot size, line width, line length. Okay, so we can override those on each of these and make them look different. Okay, now because the bricks editor adds a minimum width and height of 70 pixels, so you can see divs, I've got to unset those, otherwise it messes up the way it looks in the editor. It still works in the front end, but it just messes up the editor. Didn't seem to affect that one. Maybe if I take it off, yeah, if I take it off there, it really messes it up. Okay. Oh, this undo and bricks here is just driving me mad. When you do a Control Z, it does it twice. I'm not sure why that is, but it does. Basically, we've got some variables to override for changing the way these look. We then target our inner. So I've got another element in here, which is just another div, and it has no settings on it whatsoever. It's just a div where I've added the class with the dot decoration underscore underscore inner, so my BEM element, and that's all that is. So what we're doing here is saying target from our CSS, that inner. We want to set our position to relative on that inner. So we're going to absolutely position this outer to be relative to whatever we want it to be tracking, but the inner has to be set to relative because we're going to use a before pseudo element that we want to be absolutely positioned relative to that. Now you could also use flex. I've opted to go this way, but you could also use flex to do this as well. And it'll be just as good, but this is just the way I've done it, okay? So I could turn this into a flex column and justify the content to the middle or the center. I could do that as well, but I've just chosen to do it this way. So my inner position relative, border radius of 50 to give us our circle, width and height is our dot size from our variables up here, color for the background of that dot is the color, min width, min height unset. Again, bricks has doubled that up for me when I undid. So min width and height unset. And then what I've got there is to target my before empty content so that it displays. You always have to have something in your content, even if it's empty, otherwise the pseudo elements don't display. We want to position that, which is the line, to be absolute, same color as the dot, top of 0. That could be top of or bottom of 0. It could be sorry, not top of a bottom of 0. It could be top of 100% if you wanted to start from the bottom of that dot. We've got the left calculation is from 50% from the left minus the line width divided by 2 so that it centers it. Again, we could have actually set this to flex up here and centered the content on that. That would have been done exactly the same sort of thing, but that's just the way I've done it. And then we set our width to our line width and our height to our line length up here. So the width is how thick it is, the length is how long it is there. Right, and that's pretty much the CSS. So that is a single element, a BEM element and block and element, which is styled up, ready to go. And that gives us this 30 pixel black diameter dot with this 2 pixel black line that extends 100 pixels from the top of that to the bottom. That's our default, okay? Now, let's have a look at how we actually position that to be relative to something else. So let's look at example 2. So we've got example 2 here. So we've got the same structure, except for I'll put another block in here. I've just called that relative group. The reason I put that is I want to put my heading there, then I'll put my dot decoration inside that same block so I can make my relative group here positioned as relative, and then I can position my dot as absolute with respect to that group. So that dot is now going to be relative to that group. So if I go in there and I add some content, Rex is doing some beautiful things to me here. If I go in there and I add some content there, let's keep adding content. The dot tracks this because it is 1 EM away from the bottom of that particular element. Okay, so that's how that works there. And it's still straight up and down. Now, to change the size and color of the dot, all we do is we make sure we haven't got our dot decoration class selected. So we go to the ID level, now style, go to the CSS, and we override these 4 variables. If I wanted that to be green, override that variable, I've now got a green dot. That could also be, if you're using a framework, you could be like var. I'm using ACSS, so I'll make that my secondary. Okay, and it's now my secondary color. I'll make my primary. Now my primary color. Accent. Now my accent color. Okay, so just by overriding these, you can make it whatever you want. Let's say it's too long, let's make it 140 pixels. Okay, so we've got a shorter line that's now our accent color. Line width, too thick, make that, say, nice and thin. Let's make it, say, 3 pixels. Okay, and we just changed all the properties of that line just by overriding these variables here. But you've got to be careful not to do it on the class, or you'll do it for all instances. You want to do it on the ID only. All right, so moving on to the second example, which is exactly the same. We've got a relative group, heading, dot decoration. Now the relative group would be for whatever of these elements, whatever of these you want it to be relative to. You create a relative group, stick them both in that, and then set your absolute properties for the dot relative to that group that you're looking at. Okay. Right, so on this example here, we've got exactly the same thing. Get my dot there. My overrides here are making it purple with a bigger dot size and line width of 5 pixels. Again, let's make that, say, 3, make it look a little bit nicer. Line length of 185 pixels. Okay, now that's changed the color, the dot size, and the length and the width of the line. But this one's also rotated. How do we do that? So it's still on the ID level. We look at our transform. We've got to rotate from the top center. We've got to set our transform. So if we look at this untransformed element here, we want to rotate that from the top and the center. So the horizontal top, sorry, vertical top, horizontal center. So top center is our point there, and we want to rotate that by 90 degrees. So 90 degrees, if we want to go the other way, we'd go minus 90 degrees. Okay, and now it's rotated the other way. So it's pretty cool that all we have to do is create one set of rules. So if we look at that there, we look at the actual class. So we create one set of CSS rules here, which is our entire definition for how this dot behaves. We then override those on an ID level, just overriding the variables to give it a different look and size and color and all that sort of stuff. And then we just use the transform in Bricks UI to rotate it however we want to rotate it. But I think it's a pretty cool way to do it. I'll make the CSS available in the description of this, and beyond that, it's up to you to make this work how you want it to work. So if you like this kind of thing, hit the subscribe, hit the like. Thank you.